Now to discuss why Tea Partiers are choosing Colonial Williamsburg for their vacations. The answer is people are not wearing enough hats. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Rachel Maddow. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Keith. I have to warn you, there is a hat prop coming up in my show if you want to start shielding your eyes now.
Across America, people are getting the DVR pause button so they can get their screen caps ready. Here we go again. Yet
another way to know that I will never run for office. I will willingly put a hat on camera.
How's that?
You neither. Good to have you back, my friend.
And you too.
Thanks to you at home for staying with us for the next hour as well. My vacation is, in fact, over, which is good timing because the bluefish of Cape Cod are really angry with me. Also because there's a ton of news to get to. This is supposed to be the dog days, but wow, it really isn't. The president's big Iraq speech today. The interview tonight is one of the president's most trenchant critics on the wars and foreign policy. Also, as Keith mentioned, the reenactors of Colonial Williamsburg have become unwitting Tea Party mascots. The religious right is very, 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 very upset about the possibility of homosexuals on trains. And the most interesting story of the day is about blackberries in the desert. That is all coming up this hour. But first, have you heard? Have you heard about what happened in Texas? You haven't heard? Oh my God, listen to this. Okay, so here's Laredo, Texas. We have Laredo on a map, yeah. As you can see, it's right down there in southern Texas. You know where, see, Laredo is very close to Mexico. It's like right across from Mexico. You want to know what happened in Laredo? Did you hear what happened in Laredo? Oh my God, a Mexican drug gang called the Zetas. The Zetas rampaged over the border and took over 2 ranches in Laredo, Texas. American ranches now being run right now by a Mexican drug gang. So presumably, like, the cattle on the ranch are being herded by that Mexican drug gang. All of the rancher's stuff being used by that Mexican drug gang. Presumably all of the tractors now being driven by the Mexican drug gang. Mexican drug gangs have officially breached the border. The invasion from Mexico has begun. Did you hear about it? Did you hear about it? If you live in right-wingville in this country, then I'm sure you have heard all about it. None of it is true. None of those things actually happened, but you'd never know it in right-wingville, and it is a great story, right? It was originally fed to a tiny blog by an anti-immigration activist. Then it spread like wildfire across conservative corners of the internet. It was hailed as an act of war against the sovereign borders of the United States. It made its way to the blog of a conservative Fox News commentator named Michelle Malkin. It, of course, made it to the blog of the conservative activist who peddled the fake Shirley Sherrod is a racist scandal. It was everywhere. Drug cartel gunmen invade Texas, ranches seized. The only problem, of course, not true. Just ask around in Laredo. The Webb County Sheriff said, quote, "Our deputies went out there and talked to ranch owners in the area and found nothing." An investigator for the Laredo Police Department, where all this was supposedly going down, said, quote, "Basically everyone was shrugging their shoulders. There was no proof or evidence that was found." How does a story like this go that far around Wingnutville while plainly exculpatory, plainly contradictory evidence is out there? While the people who would actually know if it was true, when asked, say it's not true. How does a story like this get so much traction? It's because it's a good story. Particularly if you're looking to gin up your political base on the issue of immigration. Particularly if what you need to rile up your base is a good scare white people story. There's a lot of these good but fake stories out there about scary non-white people doing scary things, all reported by conservative news outlets in a way designed to gin up maximum fear. But in immigration politics, the fake, scary immigrant stories are legion. You might have also heard the one about Phoenix, Arizona now being the #2 kidnapping capital of the world. That's become a mainstream conservative talking point that's been trotted out over and over again by Republicans. When PolitiFact Texas checked that claim out when it was made by the lieutenant governor of Texas back in June, they found it to be, and I quote, false. Nevertheless, Republican Senator John McCain repeated it a few weeks later on Meet the Press.
Why is it that Phoenix, Arizona is the #2 kidnapping capital of the world? Does that mean our border is safe? Of course not.
Same claim, same result. And I quote, false, according to PolitiFact. Despite that, Republican Senator John Kyle, undaunted, is still going for it. This was in This Weekend.
Phoenix is is a very large source of kidnapping. It's called the kidnapping capital of the United States.
It's like it's just too good a talking point to stop using it, even though it's not true. Jon Kyl also distinguished himself by going into great detail about how awful illegal immigration has made crime in his home state of Arizona, a state you would think he would take care to know some factual things about.
In some of these border towns that were thought to be susceptible to law breaking of illegal immigrants, the crime is actually down. Crime in Phoenix, for instance, is down significantly over the last couple of years.
Well, that's a gross generalization. Property crimes are up. Certain violent crimes on certain parts of the citizenry are up.
Property crimes are up. Violent crimes are up. Define up, Senator Kyl. Let's take property crimes first. There were about 231,000 property crimes in the state of Arizona last year, in 2009. That was down from the year before, which had about 262,000 property crimes, a number that was down from the year before that, which was down from the year before that. Property crimes are down in Arizona right now. Senator Kyl also mentioned violent crimes being up. Let's have a look at what he thinks about up in this context. In 2009, there were about 26,000 violent crime offenses in Arizona, a number down from the year before, which was also down from the year before that, which happened to be down from the year before that. So down, 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 also known in anti-immigrant scare white people politics as up.
The United States of America has an unsecured border between Arizona and Mexico, which has led to violence, the worst I have ever seen, and numbers that stagger those who are unfamiliar with the issue.
Yes, they are staggering numbers for the exact opposite reason of what you mean. Whether or not you want to run on an anti-immigrant platform is up to you. It's a political decision. Everybody gets to choose their own political strategy. But as they say, you do not get to choose your own facts. Republicans have decided that running against immigrants is once again a great electoral opportunity for them, at least in the primaries. But they've apparently decided that they need some very extreme scare white people stories this time around in order to justify this year's crop of anti-immigrant proposals that they want to run on. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, for example, at one point in his career, he was thought of as a relatively policy-driven guy, a relatively fact-based Republican. How far he's come. Just last week, Senator Graham floated the idea of rescinding the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. That's the one that says if you're born here, you're a U.S. citizen. Put into place after the Civil War, so slaves could not be denied citizenship. Lindsey Graham wants to do away with that, and the idea of rescinding that has now gained support from Republican Senator Jon Kyl, as well as the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. I mean, if you think about it, you have to come up with pretty extreme stories about how awful immigration is in order to justify extreme stuff like repealing the 14th Amendment. I mean, sure, repealing the 14th Amendment is a radical idea, but it's exactly what we need if the Zetas are driving tractors in Laredo. Republicans bring up immigration cyclically, whenever they think it's going to be good for their electoral hopes. It actually never really turns out to be all that good for them, but they always think it's going to. It's at least a good Republican primary issue, not a very good general election issue. Illegal immigration always has to be refashioned into a crisis for every electoral cycle that Republicans want to use it. But the overall fact about illegal immigration, and this is going to shock you if you've been paying attention to some of the darker corners of the internet, the overall fact about illegal immigration is that it's not actually getting worse. What you're looking at is a graph of Border Patrol apprehensions over the last 30 years. Illegal immigration is by definition hard to measure. It's illegal and covert. But apprehensions are one of the best static measures that we've got of the scale of the problem over time. And as you can see here, the number of apprehensions made, say, back in 1978, all the way over there on the left side of the graph, roughly identical to the number of apprehensions in 2008. I mean, look at the last 10 years. Look at what's happened since the year 2000. Apprehensions essentially have cratered. Republicans have to make it seem like illegal immigration is getting worse every election cycle. There's more and more and more of them. But when you actually look at the best information we've got about illegal immigration, it's a relatively static measure that's been relatively the same for roughly my entire lifetime. The thing that it seems to most fluctuate with is whether or not there are jobs here for people to do. But don't tell that to the professional hysteria mongers who think the Zetas have taken over ranches in Texas. It is too good a story. It is too scary to white people to give up. Who cares if it's true? Joining us now is Sheriff Antonio Estrada. He's the sheriff of Santa Cruz County, Arizona, which is right on the border with Mexico. Sheriff Estrada, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Rachel, thanks for the opportunity again.
The political rhetoric coming from politicians right now on the issue of immigration might lead a person to believe that crime is skyrocketing in your part of the country, in the border counties, that the crime is out of control in a way it never has been before. What are you actually finding as sheriff of a border county in Arizona?
Well, you know, those claims are absolutely crazy. You'd think that we're dodging bullets every day down here. That's not the case. Like you indicated before, you know, apprehensions are down. Drug seizures are down. We are seeing less violence, I think, here along the border.